How's it going, everyone? So I decided to sit down and do some math and figure out how many combinations there are for all the kit guns. Actually no, I just looked onto the wiki and looked the number up. Anyways, there are 512 different combinations of kit guns that you can possibly come up with, but unfortunately most of them, the vast majority of them, and I mean the vast majority of them, are well, just straight downgrades to a few. And so I took the liberty of figuring out which ones are the best and which ones are really worth your time, because even the best ones might not really be the best option when you compare it to other weapons that you can get for about the same resources. Because let's face it, Warframe is a very grindy game and, well, it demands that you pick what is going to be the best options for you to invest hours of your time trying to get it just right, as well as the resources needed to do that. So if you are interested in seeing the showcase of the kit guns that I believe that are the most worth investing in, then continue watching. Alright, so before I even begin, let me just say that you better just go ahead and max out your standing for fortuna, because the parts that you're going to need are going to be from the last tier, or maybe the second from the last tier. It has been so long since I've actually done fortuna rep, so just as a disclaimer, you're going to need that. Now let me quickly go over my methodology for testing in this video, because I find it at least important to go over this first before I get blasted for showing boring content or whatever. Mainly I'm doing this to create recreatable conditions that anyone can go in and test against for themselves, by whatever weapon they want. Now, these conditions are simple. No buffs, no debuffs on the enemies, no corrosive projections, nothing like that, and just a simple batch of 8 Grineer Bombards. So now let's get into the first kit gun category. The first weapon set that I'm going to be tackling is the Rattleguts, and that's because it has the least variation between the secondary and primary versions. It's the Solaris United Tommy gun, and it does exactly as you expect a bullet hose to do. This was the kit gun chamber that I was really hopeful for. So much so that I basically got a cheap Riven and dumped a bunch of Kuva in to help out with testing to see how far I could push it, and I gotta say, it didn't turn out as I really would have hoped, definitely for what was available. But first, I want to at least go over how you would build this and its performance. You will undoubtedly notice that most of all these builds I'm going to have for all the different kit guns are going to be really either a crit-based or a status-based build, because these kit guns don't really lend themselves to be hybrid builds. The crit-based version of the Rattleguts build is quintessentially a Hunter's Munition build with the one notable feature that I pretty well didn't go with any multi-shot. I just found that multi-shot wasn't very useful whenever I was testing this build out, definitely in practice, so I just tried to boost up as much critical damage as I could. I also have a Riven in here that boosts my overall damage up by 91% and get the crit chance over 100%. You would just substitute in Argon Scope because it's more important to get your crit chance over 100 for the bleed procs. Now this weapon will carry you into Steel Path, but to be honest, I find that there are just weapons that have better value to them, especially now that the Soma has a augment that really does place it in top tier. I mean, I'm working on a build right now that's pushing a good million plus damage per clip, utilizing the whole energized munitions and a few other things. By the way, I am thinking about making a video on how to do that. It's surprisingly pretty cheap, so that might be something in the future. Getting back at the topic at hand, there are a lot of things that you can choose and do better for when it comes to rapid fire weapons that uses crit primarily. Now this brings us to the status build side of the Rattleguts, and well, this is really situational to whether or not how effective this weapon is going to be. And I'll also say that the biggest Achilles heel of most kit guns is going to be the fact that the primary damage type is going to be radiation, and it doesn't really have the ability to proc a bunch of, well, if any, bleed damage because, well, it's just absent. So radiation-based weapon. Because of that, you're going to have to usually use fire or some other dot to get damage on it because the base damage of the Rattleguts is pretty low. So the best way to mitigate this, definitely if you're going up against heavily armored targets, is to bring some sort of warframe that can just strip armor in some fashion. The build for this one is pretty straightforward. Go for enough status chance to get above 100%, push the multi-shot to at least 2 with a little bit of damage, and just build the status that goes with the enemy. That's basically what the build is. It'll do everything for the star chart until you hit level 100 enemies, then it really isn't going to do you well. Ultimately, the Rattleguts is a good choice for a kit gun if you're going for the critical based builds, but if you do that, it's going to be going up against with much better weapons within the same category. And even though you could theoretically get the Rattleguts at a lower mastery rank than some of those options, the amount of time that you're going to be spending getting what you need to make it, plus a lot of the resources that you're going to be using to get a lot of the stuff for kit guns is going to be used for other stuff outside of Fortuna. So there's a lot to weigh, and fortunately it's kind of in this awkward position of it's good, but it doesn't have the greatest value proposition comparing to other options outside of kit guns. Now let me move on to the Tombfinger, which I think is quite honestly the best kit gun chamber that there is right now available. It's because it hits so hard. I mean, this thing hits like a truck, and you wouldn't expect it for how small the gun looks once it's in your Warframe's hands. I am talking about, however, the primary and not the secondary. That little thing is like a little pea shooter. It doesn't do much. But the primary, well, it functions much like the Lanka does. You charge it up and it fires immediately after it gets done charging. And it also has a radial blast at the end of it, which will knock you on your ass if you get caught up in it. So don't do that. For how to build the Tombfinger, I really suggest staying more on the crit side, as seeing that it does the best with the Hunter Munitions build, because you can get some massive crits, and if you keep stacking different bonuses for increased crit damage or crit chance from other external sources, you can pretty well one-shot anything with just one tick of bleed. If you want to go with status, you still have some options, but you're going to have to be very mindful of what you're going up against and build specifically for that enemy type. Otherwise, there's going to be absolutely no use using the weapon. Let me go ahead and show you the build and finish the gameplay footage, then I can move on to the next set of kit guns. This unfortunately brings us to the kit guns that aren't really worth it at all. The Catchmoon and the Gaze. And I really would have liked this to be worth it, but with how much resources that you have to farm from Fortuna, it really isn't, because you need that stuff for so many other things, and it has to compete against so much better weapons, such as the Atmos, or the Amprax, and the Ignis Wraith. Then with the Catchmoon, because that was the Gaze, that's what the Gaze has to go up against. The Catchmoon has to go up against every single good shotgun, and unfortunately it's been nerfed so many times that, well, it just get it for mastery rank fodder. But if you do want to try to make something out of these weapons, then I would suggest for the Catchmoon, go more status than crit, because, well, whenever you go crit, the mod support isn't very good, so you won't be getting regular procs on the Hunter's Munition, which is sorely needed because slash damage will bypass armor, and because there's no innate slash on any of these weapons, you really do need it. Even for the status version of the Catchmoon, I would still only really use it to proc heat so that corrosive on other weapons will be far more effective. Now, the Gaze is, well, you could say it's okay, but it's not really that okay since it's having to go up against other beam weapons such as the Amprax, Ignis Wraith, and for the sidearms, the Atmos and the Nucor, which the Kuva version is one of the best ones just for spreading status around. So there isn't really any place that this thing can fit in. But if you are going to at least try it out, probably want to go with probably more status just to try to spread around as much heat. So you can basically use that to make the lesion more effective for corrosion damage. Unfortunately, I can't really get the critical chance build to really shine, and I've tried really hard to do that. So unfortunately, it's kind of cool because you can get a bunch of bleed procs stacked up really fast, but they're not doing much of anything. So that's sad. I wanted beam weapons to be more effective, but unfortunately they're not as good as they really should be. And I guess now I should really be talking about whether or not any of these weapons are really worth it in the grand scheme of things, because, well, they take a lot of resources to make and a lot of forma just to get usable. In fact, it takes 4 forma for any of these weapons to get to their true potential. And well, here's what I've found overall, that pretty much there's only about 3 that I can say that are really worth it. Otherwise, if you don't have a really good Riven, which you're most likely not going to because the Riven dispositions for all of the variations of these guns suck. Yeah, the rest are mastery rank fodder, and I wouldn't really suggest you getting the secondary versions because, well, even though they have better Riven dispositions, DE unfortunately made the primary versions the superior ones just because they have better mod support, as well as they get a little bit extra effects that makes them more useful. The only thing that was really worthwhile for the secondaries was the Catchmoon, and that's been nerfed to hell. But I digress. The 3 kit guns that I can say that are worth keeping is the Tombfinger that's been specialized for crits, as well as the 2 different Rattleguts, one for crit based and one for status based. Everything else is just mastery rank fodder. Okay, so for the part selection, the really important thing to consider are the loaders. And really there's only 2 choices because you want to maximize your status chance or your crit chance. So it comes down to either being the ram flare or the kill string. Those are your 2 main important choices. Now, the grips, well, I'll just show you the chart that I've kind of came up with, but it really depends on whether or not you want to have a primary or secondary, and I just went over why you should choose a primary, but hey, it is still your choice. Also, feel free to pause the video if you want to write any of this down. Anyways, so I hope you guys really enjoyed this and found this helpful because this was a lot of work. A lot of just notes, calculations, and just re-recordings to get things right and just trying to figure out how to piece everything together. Having said that, this was still quite a bit of a learning experience, and I know that I probably missed something or I could have articulated things a bit better. But thanks for watching this all the way through for those who've made it this far. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you like content. My next video should be a look at Monster Hunter World, and pretty well if it's still going to be worth it now that we know Rise is on the way. That video should not take nearly as long to finish, but I hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you in the next video.